All right, so we are here. Let's see. I'm gonna have to start because personally, I'd like to start promptly. Hello, Mathine. And I think we have a new joiner, Mr. Khan.
Hello.
Hello, Nasir. How are you?
Good, good. How are you?
Is this your first session?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. If you can kindly, on a private message, send me your email address so I can send you the class introductions and, you know, information regarding the class. So you would have that handy as well.
Okay.
Okay. Very nice. All right, let's begin. I think we started last week and we went over an overview or an introduction to Rumi himself. And then we decided that we're going to read the first, you know, we read the first 15 lines of Masnavi, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct, Massine? Yes. Okay. So after last week's session, I decided I was going to, so I wanted to go line by line with, for all the poems. And then what I noticed was that it was going to be a little difficult to actually go through it. So what we're going to do is we're going to probably, you know, go, I won't go line by line any longer. I probably will go, we'll try to combine it, you know, 3-4 lines together, and then we'll just discuss them. But just to make sure that everybody is up to speed, we start from the very beginning, and I'll just go through it very quickly. We went through and I read, now listen to this reed flute's deep lament about the heartache being apart has meant, since from the reed bed they uprooted me. My songs expressed each human's agony, a breast which separation split in two is what I seek, to share this pain with you. When kept from their true origin, all yearn for union on the day they can return. Amongst the crowd alone, I mourn my fate. With good and bad, I've learned to integrate. That we were friends, each one was satisfied, but none sought out my secrets from inside. So in these lines, the reed that Rumi is referring to, we, you know, we agreed that the reed was going to be the, was him. Literally, he is basically referring to himself as this reed, which has been, in his own words, you know, whereas he's been uprooted from reed bed, and now he feels that that separation has caused him enormous amount of pain, which, you know, he's about to tell us the story of that pain. And another thing that he mentions in these set of lines is that there's two things that he, you know, gets, you know, emphasizes on. One is the fact that when he says amongst the crowd, alone I mourn my fate, what he's referring to is that he never took a specific position and only stayed within that position. He actually ensured that he experienced life with many different crowds. And in this case, as we go through Masnavi, what we would realize is that, you know, he has, you know, he does become more integrated with different people, and he learns from them, and he also teaches how to mourn this separation, of course, and seek to become one, and seek the unity with God in their own ways. He, honestly, as we read Masnavi, you would realize that he takes stories the way he feels, it's adequate. And then, he would conclude out of those stories what he feels is the right conclusion for the specific subject that he's teaching. So in any case, so he does emphasize that, I did, make friends with everyone who basically were, were good or bad, or in his words, that we were friends. Each one was satisfied in a sense that, they had different types of understanding of life, and I was okay with that. However, none of them, through their own, through their own seeking, was able to actually find the mysteries and the answers to those mysteries that I had discovered myself. So I kept them from them and inside. So he says, my deepest secret is in this song I wail, but eyes and ears can't pretend the veil. So in this case, what he's referring to from a song is the fact that, what I'm about to tell you is this song that I will be basically reciting or singing. However, in order to understand this song, you cannot use your earthly eyes and ears to comprehend it. This is something that needs comprehension beyond the eyes and ears of your earthly, the eyes and ears. So we're gonna eventually come to understand exactly what he means by this, by the fact that the eyes that we have, which currently we see with, is something that's not adequate to actually properly understand and navigate through the secrets of life as he has discovered them. That's why he says, but eyes and ears can't pretend the veil. All right. So body and soul are joined from one whole, but no one is allowed to see the soul. And in this case, he's using, and he keeps on using these type of examples, which are literally extremely simple. However, they, bring a very, very, serious, meaning behind all of this to him, or to us in this case. And what he's bringing here is the fact that, yeah, the body and soul are joined together. That's why the body is, alive. However, no one is allowed to see the soul, just because. So we see the soul through the through the signs that we discover. So for instance, the fact that we can breathe, or the fact that we are able to have conversations, or we're able to feel, or all of that. That is how we start realizing that, okay, this is working for us or not. Then it says, it's fire, not just hot air. The reed flutes cry. If you don't have this fire, then you should die. We talked about this last time as well. The literal translation is perhaps a little weak here. What he says is that in order for you to understand this, you have to have a fire in your belly. You have to have a fire to want. You have to have that that willingness to actually go and discover this. And if you don't have this, you can never, become what you want to become. I have to say this, that Rumi believes that all of us are not living, we're actually dying here. And his whole philosophy is for us to find a way to start living. And in this case, what he says is that in order for you to live, you have to actually want this thing. If you don't want it, then that's why, he comes back and says you should die, which in literal translation in Farsi, that part is like either you are or you are not. And in this case, if you don't want it, then you just don't exist. You are not anything that can even, bring any sort of, pleasure or change into your surroundings. Love's fire is what makes every reed fruit pine. Love's fervor thus lends potency to wine. The reed consoles those forced to be apart. Its notes will lift a veil upon your heart. Whereas antidote or poison like this song, or confident, or one who's pined so long, this reed relates to torture's path ahead, recalls the love with which Majnun's heart bled. What these lines, what they're referring to, and we talked about them also last time, is the fact that he's talking about the fire that we need to have from within, and he's using an example of how a wine turns from grape into a wine by its own fire and its own potency. The same thing happens with, of course, vinegar, but vinegar doesn't really taste that well, and it doesn't make you, drunk. However, the wine does. And this drunkenness that we're talking about also is something that eventually in subsequent sessions we're going to go through, and what Rumi is talking about as far as, what does it mean to be drunk? So the reed consoles those forced to be apart. Its note will lift a well upon your heart. And in this case, he's talking about reed, referring to folks like himself. And it says, if you actually become one with us, or if you actually try to understand the secrets that we have within ourselves, you will be consoled through, this separation that you're experiencing right now. And eventually you're going to start, seeing things that you need to see by having the veil, be lifted from your heart. And in this case, he's talking about there is nothing like it. There is no, antidote, or in this case, he says you need a poison and then you need an antidote in order to actually better, understand life. The reality is that the more, so our bodies subsequently get stronger every time that we actually have an issue or an illness, and then we get the antidote in, and once we do that, that just by itself, makes us stronger towards those sicknesses. Now he's using that example here, that the where is an antidote or poison like this song, or confident, or one who's pined so long. In this case, what he's trying to say is that this is the best medicine, or the best solution for you to actually discover the secrets of this separation. This read relates to torture's path ahead. We talked about this last time, as far as the fact that in order for us to fully understand this path, which eventually this is the path of understanding love, there is a torturous path ahead, recalls the love with which Majnun's heart bled, of course. And in this case, he's referring to a story of what they call Layli or Majnun, which is a love story, which in this case, Majnun was in love with Layli, and eventually they never find each other. However, Majnun never gives up, and so forth. And that has become a very strong Persian tale of how to seek love, and how to be committed to a loving relationship. But in this case, what he's saying is that Majnun's heart bled for his lover, and that's what we need. We need to actually get to that situation and that to that level. The few who hear the truth, the reed has sung, have lost their wits, so they can speak this tongue. And in this case, says that there are a few who have understood, and they have fully comprehended that what I'm about to say in this case, basically what he's about to tell us, and in the way they have, they are not, they are not using the normal ways of conversation in order to talk this language, which is the language of love. So he's again keeps on emphasizing that this language, or this language of love, is just completely different than everything else that we comprehend or understand. The day is wasted if it's spent in grief, consumed by burning aches without relief. Now, he's bringing out a very, very simple example that every time we are using, we are grieving about anything, earthly or not, our days are wasted, because grieving is something that actually kind of pins us down. It disables us to actually be more, more productive and better understanding as far as what's going on. However, he says, consumed by burning aches without relief. However, good times have long passed, but we couldn't care when you're with us, our friend beyond compare. Now, in this case, what he's referring to is that whether there are things that happens in our lives which makes us grieving, or whether it puts us in a path which may be a little torturous. However, if you are with us, if I have you with me, and in this case, he's talking about, I'm going to use the example of lover. However, what he's referring to is God. If and it says, if you are with us, then I have no problem. I should not, the day, I really don't care. When you're with us, our friend beyond compare. You're not comparable to anyone. That's the definition of God, basically, in any religion, actually. While ordinary men on drops can thrive, a fish needs ocean daily to survive. Now, what he's referring to in here, as we go forward in Masnavi, what you're going to realize is that Rumi had a very, very interesting connection to the fish. And the reason that he likes fish is because what he believes about fish is that a fish lives in an ocean. And everything about that ocean is what makes a fish be alive. Basically, a fish eats in the ocean, sleeps in the ocean. It's his life is in the ocean. He has to be, there shouldn't be any barriers between him and the water. Now, the moment you actually take the fish out of the water, of course, he wants to get back into the water again. This is really the example that he's using about him. What he believes is that we were all part of one being at some point. We all got separated from our, origin, or from where we became conscious, or as we were connected to that eternal consciousness. We were separated, and we came to this earth in order to experience earthly, lives. And he feels that that's exactly how, the example that he's using is a fish, that, we were like a fish in an ocean, unbound, unlimited. And then we were brought to this earth, which is bounded and it's limited. And we are experiencing a limited and earthly life. That's why he's using this example, or he's using the the fish as an example here in these poems. So while ordinary men on drops can thrive, a fish needs ocean daily to survive. So he's basically referring to, again, folks like himself, that in order for me to survive, I need to have that strong connection with my source, that strong connection with my lover, or that strong connection with my God in order to survive. The way the rip must feel, the raw can't tell. My speech must be concise, so farewell. And in this case, he says that whoever is not basically ready to hear these words, they cannot necessarily, take it. They can't understand it, and they cannot, necessarily even connect with it. What he believes is that people, in order to better understand his words and what we're about to start, you need to actually be fully, and in this case, he's using the raw versus cooked, from inside, in a sense that you need to be ready. You need to have that desire. You need to really want something. So that means that you need to have felt the distance, or the separation that you have experienced. And in this case, that's why you need this. So, and then he says, then, I need to basically shorten my speech, and that's it. Now, the reason he says, and so farewell, this goes back to the way that Masnavi was written. The tale, the way it's been said, is that he has a friend, which his name is Hesamuddin, which you will hear his name quite a bit throughout Masnavi. And apparently, if you remember, I said that, there's two major books that Rumi has. One is basically poetry of Rumi, and another one is the Masnavi. And Masnavi was written about 10 years after the poetries were finished. And the way that they had started, or it was, the way this thing started to be put together, is when this friend of his, Hesamuddin, goes to Rumi and says, in order for folks to fully understand your poetry, you need to somehow have a book that actually explains this poetry to everyone. And just like, mystical poets like Attar, before you, so Attar does have a few books which actually explains his poetry and so forth, or what he has recited as poems. It's like, you need to actually do this. So apparently the story is that Rumi had, taken a piece of paper out of his, out of his coat or clothes. And he's like, well, I have been thinking about it, and here's the 18 lines that I have written so far. So that's why there is a farewell at the, at the 18th line. And this is the very, very, the first 18 lines basically is all about him and what he sees, this whole universe, and how this universe is all, connected to each other. Okay. Any questions so far? You guys have to kind of help me with this. Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Is this the right pace? Are we connecting? So I'm going to take it as this is going well, if there is no objections. Go ahead.
I think it's good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. Now, so from this point on, what we've got is basically him and, in the gatherings that he would have as he's actually putting Masnavi together. So this is how the lines go. So unchain yourself, my son, escape its hold. How long will you remain a slave of gold? You have tried to fit inside a jug the sea. It only has a day's capacity. A greedy eye is never satisfied. Shells only when content grow pearls inside. While men, whose clothes are ripped to shred by love, are cleansed of greed, like this, to rise above. Be joyful, love, our sweetest bliss is you, physicians for all kinds of ailments too. The cure for our conceit and stubborn pride, like Plato here with Galen side by side. All right. This does need some explanations as far as what he's talking about. I know. So the first thing that he says, it's as if it's an introduction. So he goes, you need to unchain yourself and be, and when he's talking about unchaining yourself, he's basically, in order for us to grasp what he's talking about, we need to start kind of, letting go of a lot of limiting thoughts, which kind of, puts us in a, kind of in a compromising position. And he will explain how that is, as we go forward. Okay, so is like, how long will you remain a slave of gold? What that means is that what he's referring from a gold perspective is this material life and earthly life. How long is like, are you willing to actually be a slave and be chained to all these attachments in this life? And basically, another thing that he says is that if you have to understand that if you try to, as he goes through and he talks about greed, he says the greed is something that has been born into this life. There are certain attributes to our soul which never existed before we actually took this body. If we were to look at, and Rumi believes in this. He believes that we were all pure love, for instance. He believes that we were all pure light. He believes that we were all made from kindness. We were all made from generosity. We all, were made out of, abundance. All of these, attributes and are attributes of, how our creations, was done and was put together. Now, there are certain other attributes, of course, that happen once we came to this earth. Now, there are biblical stories of, the two sons of Adam and Eve, which one kills the other, right? I think in every religion, we know about this. Certainly there is a, ayah in the Quran, which, talks about that. I know in Bible and also in Torah, they also talk about this as well. So what happened is that as we took these bodies and we came into this earth, there are certain other attributes that just, surfaced up. And what they were are things like jealousy, or wanting more, or our anger, or our rage, or things like that. These are things that happened because of our earthly body. Okay. Now, think about that. As a matter of fact, the fact of the matter is that this body just puts us in a position to, because the body itself is something that is completely needy. It needs stuff, right? And this kind of relates into the conversation of the mind and the ego. And here, what Rumi is referring to is that I'm just going to give you a quick introduction of the ego, because we need that also in order to fully understand Rumi poetry. Ego, in a very simple form, is what we need in order to survive. If we don't have ego, we don't have the drive to actually go out there and do what we do on a daily basis and do all daily chores and things like that. We need the ego. So the ego makes us, basically wanting more. The ego wants us to, grow and drive forward and things like that, right? And the ego is also very protective of us. As a matter of fact, when a child is born, think about it. When a child is just born, what happens to the child is that it's born without a mind or an ego. That child, as he comes out of the womb, doesn't really understand good from bad and doesn't have any ego whatsoever. He doesn't understand jealousy. All he knows is that there is a need within him, which when he gets hungry, he cries, or when he feels like he needs to sleep, he cries. So there's one language that he knows, or one sign, and everything else is just basically what this body is dictating for him to have or to get. Now, think about that. As the child starts growing, he's going to start developing a mind and also an ego. And this by itself is something that eventually is going to rapidly build his character. So at some point, the child is going to be, told not to do something, or at some point, the child is going to have something taken away from him, which that develops, the feelings of anger or feeling of rage, or at some point he feels that, there's something that he wants to do and one of his friends is able and he's not able. So he starts realizing that there is something called jealousy. So all these things are things that he starts developing. Now, as we develop these attributes within ourselves, which is all egotistic attributes, it's all from ego. What happens is then eventually we form a character. And this character that we form is a mix of all of these things. It's just a mix of everything. And this mixture is what we bring into the world on a daily basis. Now, somehow, somewhere, we feel that this is not adequate. This is why we start looking after finding out if there is a, if there is a way to actually, because there is another thing within us, which is our heart, and there is a soul. So if we were to look at everything, a human being has got four attributes or four major, I don't want to call them functions, but there's four major pillars. It's the mind and the ego and the heart and the soul. So the mind and the ego are the ones that actually work the best together. We fully understand them and it just makes sense for us. So, hey, so-and-so is mean to me, I'm not going to actually go to his house. So-and-so is very nice to me, I will do this. These are all very mind-driven decisions which ego dictates them. So ego tells you that you're comfortable here or you're not comfortable here, and the mind makes the decision, right? Then the heart itself is what I would like to call it the transmission to God. So when we are when we're into this thing, and when we are how should I say it, when you are trying to connect out of any earthly possession, or when you're actually thinking about what you may need in order for things to happen for you out of what is out of your control, that's when your heart starts talking. The heart is basically this antenna, this transmitting antenna that connects your soul to the source. Okay. Now, the more we work with our heart, the more our ego starts, of course, working, because ego doesn't like that. Ego doesn't like to be set aside. Ego doesn't like to take the back seat. So ego tries to remind you of what you need. And your needs are the stuff that chains you to this earth. Okay. So in this case, this is why he's talking about a greedy eye. Of course, when you have $10, you want another $10. And you want another $10, another one, another one. Why? Because a greedy eye is never satisfied. And then he actually gives us an example but you have to understand that there's another thing, which is the contentment that we need in our lives, because shells only when content grow pearls inside. So in order for us to grow our pearl within ourselves, and he's referring to this jewel, which was given when we were first formed from the breath of God. In order for us to fully understand and realize that, we need to be content in order to be satisfied. Okay. So that's why, he's bringing this up, because this is important to him. And it's important for us to fully understand and realize it, and hopefully practice it, because it eventually will affect us. So while men whose clothes are ripped to shreds by love are cleansed of greed, like this to rise above. Now you understand that, the people who were ready to shred their belongings, or in this case, he's referring to clothes, and it's a symbolism for belongings. So when you're ready to let go of that, that is when you can actually, that means that love is approaching you and you are actually on the right path. So are cleansed of greed. So your greediness is set aside, like this to rise above. So you can now elevate your soul, and your soul starts, elevating. So just to be very, again, I just want to make sure we understand this. And hi, Maury. I just went through a bunch of things, which then I have to probably on a separate session tell you exactly what they are. But we're talking about four elements within ourselves, which is the ego, the mind, the heart, and the soul. And the ego and the mind are stuff that actually, it's what we actually get when we're born into this life. Heart and soul is. Heart is basically what I call the transmitting antenna to the source. And soul is, of course, what's been given to us when we were formed out of the breath of God. Okay. So in this case, again, a greedy eye is never satisfied. Shells only when content grow pearls aside. Now, in this case, we talked about contentment. In order for us to realize the value of the jewel within ourselves, or this pearl, or this gem that is within ourselves, we need to exercise contentment. If we keep on, being greedy, and this is greedy is an attribute which relates to ego. Ego keeps telling us that you have to have more. You have to have more. There is no certain thing about tomorrow, so therefore you have to have everything that you can. And that by itself is something that is a limiting belief, because that limits you from realizing full real value of love. Think about it. Another thing that I want to actually exemplify here, and I fully believe that all of you guys love or have loved at some point in your life, earthly love. When you love somebody, there is nothing that you think about except your lover. There is nothing else that you actually have on your mind except your lover. Why is that? Because everything that matters to you is your lover. That's it, nothing else. That is when you have completely let go of anything that's important to you, and everything else is your lover, whether it's a she or a he, doesn't matter. Now, in this case, he's trying to figure, he's trying, that's why he's telling us that this is a torturous path, because as you're going through this path, this lover that he's trying to introduce to us is not earthly. As we actually will read through the Masnavi, he's going to start telling us that this guy is actually, and I'm referring to as this guy just because my English is not so well. But this being that, this lover or this source that we're actually kind of looking after and we're trying to, connect to, is actually pretty mean, like the lovers in this life. You could actually get, when you're, dialing up, let's say, your girlfriend or boyfriend or husband or wife, sometimes they don't answer. And just because, they want to make sure that, you're constantly after them. Now, he is actually, Rumi will bring examples like this. It's literally examples like this that he will bring. And these examples, he's trying to tell us that you will experience these feelings as you're going forward, because these are true feelings. And these are feelings that you feel with your heart, not your ego. Your ego is the one that tells you, you got to let go. You cannot do this. She is actually making you look bad. She wants you to go after her. She's playing games. She's this, she's that, or he's this, or he's that, and all that stuff. That's ego and the mind. The heart is like, no matter what, just keep doing what you're doing. That's your lover. You gotta get one with her. Now, we're gonna get to that very quickly as well, as far as what that really means. So, while men whose clothes are ripped to shred by love, so in order for your clothes to be ripped to shred, you have to let go. You have to actually be willing to rip something out of yourself. You have to be able to let go and shed anything that's earthly. Are cleansed of greed, therefore, like this to rise above. Be joyful. Love, our sweetest bliss is you. Physician for all kinds of ailment too. Now, he's talking about, again, folks like himself or anyone who is in his path. He's like, be joyful. And in the sense that he's talking about, know the fact that this path, as it brings pain, okay, as it brings pain for us, it will be bringing its antidote as well, or it will bring the medicine as well. That's why, the physician for all kinds of ailment too is referred to in there. He's talking about the fact that the condition of stepping through this path is for you to go through the pain, but you have to now trust that there is a medicine and there is a physician who will take care of you. The cure for all conceit and stubborn pride, like Plato here with Galen side by side. Now, he's saying that, remember that our pride, again, is a product of our ego, right? So it's our ego which gives us our pride. Now, again, we form that as we are actually, growing up in this life. So again, it is stuff that happens in our daily lives and what happens at home and in school and so forth. These, they form the way we are eventually, right? Now, he's referring to two characters, which is Plato and Galen. Just a quick note about them. Galen is what they refer to as because these are back into Greek, history. Plato was famous for being a very, a very good physician, but the way he was doing his, his work was basically the old traditional medicine. And Galen is somebody who came after Plato, and he was also good. And he is basically what they call apparently the father of the new medicine. So What he's referring to here with Plato and Galen is the fact that since Plato goes with the traditional medicine, he's talking about somebody who is, this is a a symbolism for someone who is going to take care of our soul. And Galen is somebody who is going to take care of our body. Okay. And he's like, in order for you to actually get them side by side, you need to trust and you need to be able to let go of this stubborn pride. To love the earthly form soars heavenwards. Now he's talking about the true love. And he says, with that, that's how you actually start soaring upwards. In this case, when you are soaring heavenwards, Rumi believes that we eventually have to grow wings. This may sound like a fairy tale, like the movie Captain Hook, you know, that a fairy has to actually, you know, or Peter Pan you need to fly. But if you even remember that movie, if you have ever seen it, in that movie, Peter Pan cannot fly until he actually starts believing in himself. And believing in yourself means that you actually have to find and discover the jewel within yourself. I mean, this is how Hollywood has, you know, taken these meanings out and they make movies out of them, literally. So he says, to love the earthly form soars heavenwards. The mountain dances nimble like a bird. Now, the mountain dancing, okay, is basically talking about the fact that the story of Moses. And, you know, in the next line, we actually will get the full concept of it. Love made Mountain Sinai drunken visibly, so Moses fell and swooned immediately. This is the story of Moses, basically when he actually went to Mount Sinai. This is a biblical story. It is also something that's been referred in the Quran as well. What happens is Moses goes, and one of the things that he asks God is that, show me yourself. And God basically tells him that you do not have the capacity in your earthly eye to actually see me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just show a very small glimpse of my greatness into the mountain. And you see what happens to the mountain. And the mountain goes flat. Okay. Now he's talking about the fact that this was, you know, this was something that happened because of Moses wanting to see his lover. He wanted to have that unconditional and unbroken bound. And the problem was that the body is something that cannot experience that fully. Okay. So it says, with my own confidant, if I'd been paired, just like the reed, such stories I have shared. Now, this is an interesting, it's interesting just translating it. So in order for you to be able to actually play the flute or the reed, for those of you who have tried this, if you just actually put it right on your lips, I mean, touching your lips, and start blowing into it, nothing is going to come out of it. It just won't happen. There is this very, very specific distance that you have to have. And your lips are supposed to be in such a very, you know, specific position so that the flute or the reed can actually now start, you know, producing a sound. Okay. Now he says that if I was paired with my own confidant, and in this case, this is again a bad translation of the Farsi poem, because he's like, basically what he's saying is that I only can speak when I'm paired with my lover. If I'm paired with my lover, I can talk. If I can't be paired with my lover, I cannot say anything. There is a part in book 6 of Masnavi, and we've got a long way to go there, but I'm going to just talk about it very quickly. He says that he's talking about the story of Prophet Muhammad. And in there, the tale of, Prophet Muhammad is the fact that, he was illiterate. He had to actually go back. I mean, once he actually became prophet, he needed to go back and read the verses of the Quran that actually had come to him. And he is scared because he tells, Gabriel in that time, as the angel who was bringing the messages to him, that, hey, how do I actually say these things? Because people won't believe me. And what if I actually run out of things to say? And Rumi has a very, very, very beautiful line in there that says that the fact that when you are paired with your lover will tell you, you should not be scared anymore, because what you're connected to is just an endless ocean. And that is exactly how Rumi felt about his poetry. And that is how he tells us that if we are paired with our lover, or if we are paired with our true origin, in this case, which is God, then what we say would never end. We cannot run out of stuff because you're connected to an endless ocean. So he says, just like the reeds, such stories I would have shared. Okay, so without a kindred spirit there to hear, the storyteller's voice must disappear. Now, he said what he is referring to here. It says that those who are connected, those who become connected, there's something that would happen to them. And the way it happens is that there is no storyteller anymore. They will not be telling stories. It is how they feel which actually makes things work for them. This is why I want you guys to see the movie Matrix, for instance, because there is a part in there which it's all about how they feel and how they get connected to each other. Now, what we say has a form, and Rumi believes that this form is inadequate to take care of our describing our feeling and our understanding of our connection. Okay.
I have a question for you, Mohsen, when you're at your point. So you're reading that. I mean, I don't unfortunately read Farsi, and my Farsi is not that good to understand even the translations in Farsi, but so you know much better what that meant. But when I read the English of what you said, it reads more to me, and please, I just want to know if it could be read that way.
Sure.
You know where it says, without a kindred spirit there to hear, the storyteller's voice must disappear, and if the rose should vanish from its sight, the nightingale will keep its beak shut tight. It's because those things kind of mean the same thing to me, those 4 lines. I thought it means like it's when you don't have your lover, or like whatever, the person who you're kindred spirits with, your soul, like whatever. And I don't even think this means per se lover. It could be like your soul sister, the person you connect with.
You're right.
It's that they, we speak the same language, even if it's not the same language, they hear what you say. Because, we can talk and talk. I can be saying something to you, but if you don't have the ear to hear what I'm saying, the meaning, do you know what I mean? Then they're not, versus, is that what the Farsi version?
It is actually. So it says, I'll read the Farsi part just for the sake of this conversation. It says, با لب دمساز خود گر جفتمی, یعنی دمساز meaning the fact that the lips that are actually talking. If I am paired with that, okay, همچون من گفتنی ها گفتنی. So therefore, just like the reed, I could say whatever I could say. Now, هر که او از همزبانی شد جدا. So if I actually am separated from whoever, just like how you said, whoever actually is connected with me through my soul and heart. Okay.
Right.
هر که او از همزبانی شد جدا بی زبان شد گشت. So therefore then my lips are tight and I will not talk anymore. Yes.
Right. Okay.
So you're spot on. And in this case, again, the reason I was trying to explain this as far as so you actually gave me a very good segue. It's the connection through the heart that actually makes these things actually worth talking now. Because Rumi is not interested in connections of the minds. He doesn't want that. He totally, you guys will see in about 3-4 sessions that he totally disses the mind. He doesn't want it. He wants the heart to grow, and he wants the heart to explode, actually. I mean, just, as far as the fact that, it needs to shred so that the light can get in there. Okay. So you're absolutely correct on that. Great job. Great job. So I'm going to go then to the next line. Love, the loved ones all, the lovers just a scream, a dead thing, while the loved one lives unseen. Okay, let me explain this. So what Rumi believes, again, is that if you're truly in love, and think about an earthly love, if you're truly in love with your lover, so that means that you have completely dissolved in your lover. So therefore, you as, am I saying this right? Yeah. You as the person who is loving would not exist. It's all your lover. So there is a oneness that he's referring to in here. It's like if you have completely been dissolved in your lover, then therefore you're dead. And that's correct. I mean, the dead means the fact that now you are completely emptied out of your ego. Because here's the deal. Think about it. The fact of the matter is that, again, if we have an ego, that means that we're living. Once the ego is gone, we're dead. In this case, ego is something that in Farsi we refer to as self. Same thing as English, of course. So if your self doesn't exist, therefore you don't exist. And he says that in order for you to be able to love, you have to let go of the self completely. So the loved ones all. So that's so the lover's just a screen. And in this case, you as the lover is just a show. Not even a show, just something that is about to dissolve. A dead thing, while the loved one lives unseen. Now, Rumi believes, so there is a poem that he has, which I think at some point we're going to go through it. And he straight up says, you need to die for your lover. The words in Farsi says, bemirid, bemirid, dar in ishq bemir. You have to die for this love. And we're going to talk about what he really means dying for this love. And as also Morvarid, you said it perfectly, you have to completely be out of yourself. You have to completely be empty. So when shunned by love, you're left with emptiness. A bird without its wings knows such distress. So he says, if there was, so in this case, if there was no love for someone who is desiring it so bad, you're basically left with nothing. So in this case, he's saying that what gives me everything and all my meanings for everything in my life is love. Without that, I got nothing. As if I am a bird, and in this case, in the Farsi version, it says that the bird without the wing. So in this case, it says bird without its wings, no such distress. So in this case, that means that, you know, I only know how to fly if I have grown the wings of love. How can my mind stay calm this lonely night when I can't find here my beloved light? A question. So in this case, it says, if I'm not connected, if I am not connected to my beloved every night, I cannot basically, I cannot be calm. In this case, he's saying that I have, my anxiety only comes when I am separated from my beloved. Love wants its tale revealed to everyone, but your heart's mirror won't reflect the sun. Now, he is giving us a message from the eternal love and the divine love, that love is trying to tell us everything about its message, or about what, you know, about itself. But in order for us to get this message, remember, so we have 4 components: the mind and the ego and the heart and the soul. Your heart needs to be able to get this message. Your heart is the transmitter or the antenna for this thing. But your heart's mirror won't reflect the sun. But the heart does not reflect this. You don't know why we can't perceive it here. Your mirror's face is rusty. Scrape it clear. So basically what he tells us is that the reason that we cannot get this transmission, or we cannot, you know, get this message, is because our mirror is, or our heart, basically the mirror of our heart is rusty, and therefore it just cannot show us what we need to see. Now, so this is the first, again, the very first section of Masnavi, which basically tells us about himself, tells about how he feels, tells about how he feels about love, tells us what we need about love, tells us what we need to let go, and tells us about the journey, that it's going to be extremely crazy and muddy. So that's that. So out of this, I got a little bit of time, and I have to be honest with you guys, since it's just us now. And when I say us, I'm considering Maury, Mateen, and Sammy, you know, the us, and everyone else. And Mahdi is my friend. He just likes to come in and go. So I don't know even if he's listening. The fact of the matter is that this is new, and I appreciate you guys joining. Last week, I wasn't feeling, after I was done, I was exhausted and I wasn't feeling comfortable. And Maury, at the beginning, I said, I'm going to change the format. So therefore, I would read a bunch of lines, and then, you know, I would just translate them line by line. It would not have made sense. As we go forward, this format is going to become a little bit easier and so forth. And I still want you guys to participate in it, but I want you guys to first fully understand the language of how he's talking about and so forth. And eventually, hopefully when, you know, if and when others join, then, you know, we'll just go from there step by step and see how this thing actually would show itself. I want to go to the next story real quick, if you guys don't mind. I want to take about 10-15 minutes, and I want us to get to the next story, because the next story is a story of love in a very, very, very funny way. Did you guys get the book? You didn't get the book. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start sending you guys also clips of the book as I'm going to be reading them. And in this case, you know, but eventually I think it wouldn't be a bad thing for you guys to get the book. So I'll be supplying the PDF files as well and all that. All right. So after he tells us everything about love, he is now telling us a tale of a king. Now, a king, in this case, I rather have this discussion afterwards, but I have a feeling you guys will have this discussion beforehand. There's 4 elements to this story. There is a gorgeous maid. Now, back in the days, the ancient times, the kings would buy slaves or maids, and some of them would make their ways into their harem, and some of them, would make their ways into the kitchen. I mean, that's just how it was. So there was a maid, there is a king, there is a heavenly doctor, and then there is a there's another guy. Let's just say there's another guy. And there's all these characters resemble something within us, and I think you guys will eventually catch that as we go through this. This is a long story. Probably would take us 3 or 4, 2 or 3 sessions to actually go through the entire thing. However, it's important for us to understand it because, again, everything that we study is going to build upon itself and we keep going forward. Okay, so let's just very quickly just go through it because it's not a bad thing. It's actually pretty fun. So it says, now here's a tale for you to contemplate. It tells the truth about our present state. There was a king, most glorious and refined, with spiritual and temporal power combined. Once he was riding on his favorite steed, on hunting with his friends, whom he would lead. So hunting was perhaps one of, it's just like golf these days, I guess. It's one of those things that people like to do at those, at those times with, in their spare time. So when he beheld a slave girl near the fray, his soul became her servant straight away. So basically, he sees this girl and he falls in love. Apparently, the girl is gorgeous, all that. His old heart fluttered like a caged young bird. He met the asking price without a word. But just when he had signed and sealed this trade, by fate and illness overcame the maid. So in Farsi, the way this poem goes is the fact that once he actually consummates that relationship, then the girl immediately falls ill. Like buying saddles for your mule one day to find the wolves have chased it far away. So he's given us an example that in our life, sometimes we buy a saddle and then all of a sudden the horse is gone. Or fetching water with your finest pots for it to smash as if there's been a plot. Or if you actually go get water because you were hungry and all of a sudden you realize that, or the pot just breaks. Okay. So the king brought healers from all distant land. Our lives are both now in your expert hands. So he brings doctors and he wants them to actually, get, basically heal this girl. And he instructs them that my life and her life are both in your hands. My life is over till she is well again, for she is my medicine, distinguished man, light of my life. Whoever makes her well, more treasure wins than he could ever sell. So he actually puts a pretty, big reward for it. That if you guys, get her well, you would be rewarded, handsomely. As one, they said, our lives will sacrifice. We will confer and seek from all advice. We're the messiahs for the world's distress, a slave for every wound we each possess. So apparently there are a bunch of them, and these guys all have different, specialties, and they're like, we'll take care of this. Don't worry, we got this. Now, this is an important, part. It says they skipped, if God wills, through their arrogance, So God revealed through them men's impotence. So he immediately brings in a very, very heavy concept, which you guys will get into this discussion, I'm sure, which is destiny versus choice. Do we have a choice in this life, or is our lives predetermined? That is the question that a bunch of people have been asking forever, and there's never been an answer. But I'm going to tell you that you guys will find an answer, believe it or not. So in this case, it says, all right, so what happened is that they did not say if God wills, or in, as we say in Farsi, inshallah, or in Arabic, or, God willing. They didn't say that. So in this case, what happened was God revealed through them men's impotence. So God revealed to them that no matter how successful or how, well versed you think you're in your field, you make sure you say God willing, because you're going to need that. So it says, I mean a mission from inside one's heart, not just the utterance. That's the lesser part. Is that I don't want to say, so he's trying to kind of emphasize this, that not necessarily something that to be said by words, but something that you actually should start believing in your heart. And these doctors didn't believe this in their heart. They did not believe. They felt that they had everything that they needed in order to get this thing done. Many have failed to say if God should will, although their souls were in accordance still. So there's people who have not said this words just like speaking it out. However, their heart and soul was well aligned with it. And he's like, your heart and soul needs to be aligned with this belief that there is there is a will of God that you should submit to, if in case things don't go necessarily your way. Again, we're going to get to these discussions very soon. I mean, this is something that, it's inevitable in the next few stories. It's just something that, and he purposely put us in this path. Although their souls were in accordance still. Okay, so the more these men produced a slave or cure, the more distress the girl seemed to endure. So the girl kept on getting sicker. The girl became much thinner than a hair. The king wept tears of blood in his despair. So the king is now completely sad, and he keeps on crying about this, of course, because he loved this girl. Now, remember, he's trying to also give us a feel for how an earthly love is. So this king, in this case, is completely in love with this girl. The drugs they have made, they gave her, made her feel more ill, and almond oil just made her drier still. So in this case, he's referring to if there was anything that they would give her to basically, an almond oil is something that, they would give somebody to have a better digestion system, and they were being constipated or something like that. Fruit made her constipation even worse. Water increased the flame as if a curse. So if she would even drink water, she would actually feel more thirsty, and everything was just upside down. Okay. All right. How are we doing on time? Do you guys want to give me another 10 minutes, or are we done? 10 more minutes?
Sure, 10 more minutes. I'm good with 10 more minutes.
10 more minutes. Okay. Because I want to go through the next one as well. So the healing of the sick slave girl. So what happens is, the title here is actually very inadequate, because the girl, he is now the the king is now trying to find some sort of a cure from within his heart, because he realizes these doctors are useless. So he says, oh, you whose smallest gift is the whole world. So now the king is praying. And in this case, in Farsi, it's actually pretty beautiful, because it's basically part of some of Rumi's prayers. And Rumi's prayers are just very beautiful, and they are very, very powerful. It's just amazing lines of poetry. So that's why I encourage you guys to actually learn Farsi as well. So, oh, you whose smallest gift is the whole world. He's talking about God, that the smallest gift that you gave us is the entire universe. Words can describe this mystery you have unfurled. Now, in this case, think about it. This smallest gift he's talking about, this smallest thing that was awarded to us, is the entire universe. We got corona and our life went upside down. And we started realizing, for instance, that shaking hands with each other was a gift. Hugging each other was a gift. We didn't know that. So Rumi starts telling us about these small stuff that we take for granted, and they're gifts. So our refuge when we find ourselves in need. So God is our refuge. True. When we find ourselves in a desperate situation, everyone, regardless of religion, race, whatever, we all say, oh God, help us. Once more, you have strayed by failing to seek heed, to take heed. They did say, though I know your secrets well, it doesn't mean I don't want you to tell. Now in this case, what he's referring to basically is that he's talking about God and the fact that God knows everything about us, and he keeps our secrets hidden. This is actually, there is a word which is called sattar. Sattar, which is both in Farsi and Arabic, means somebody who actually hides the flaws of others. And God, one of the things that we say God is sattarul uyub, or somebody who actually hides everyone's issues. Now think about it. If our secrets were supposed to be revealed, we would all be, everybody, you know that everybody has a skeleton in the closet. It's just the way it is. So he says that he's still talking about God and his grace. And he's like, you just have never basically put me in a bad position and bad situation. When from this inmost depth he raised a scream. Now, because he prayed from the depth of his heart, the sea of bounty surged and sent him a dream. Now, Rumi is telling us that in order for us to have a prayer answered, we have to pray from the deepest place of our heart. Anything that comes from your heart will be answered. And I'm not the one who's saying this. This is him telling us this. He will give us numbers of examples as we go forward. That every time we think through our mind immediately puts a doubt in our head. Think about it. Every time you asked something from God, it was something that you needed from your heart. You either asked it when you were alone, or you were in a very, very desperate situation, which you knew that your mind is incapable of making a decision for you. Think about that. Think about your experiences. So when from its inmost depth he raised the scream, the sea of bounty. Now think about it. The word is sea of bounty. The fact of the matter is that Rumi is trying to tell us that this universe is a sea of things to give, and we just need to tap into it. That's why one of the attributes that we were first formed from it is abundance. When we took this body, our ego gave us need and the feel of emptiness, or the feel of what do you call it, when you feel like everything is done and everything is over. Sorry.
Distraught in a sad way?
Of course, yeah.
Oh, like
Thank you.
distraught, like
Thank
your wit's
you.
end. Right.
Thank you. But we were born out of abundance. We came from abundance. So this sea of bounty needs to start working, but we need to tap into it in order to work. Okay. So when from his inmost depth he raised the scream, the sea of bounty surged and sent a dream. So this guy now, he's dreaming. Rumi believes that we get messages through our dreams. You guys will hear about this in the subsequent, pages. An old man then appeared, whose voice was deep. Greeting, your wish is granted, humble king. Tomorrow to your aid our man will bring. Trust them as one who's mastered how to cure. Accept his word, for he is sincere and pure. Witness amazing magic and applaud. See in his temperament the might of God. Now, basically, what he's saying is that once he dreamed from within his heart, and he connected to the source answered, and the answer was very clear, that we're going to send you someone who is going to be the answer to your prayers. And I'm going to leave you guys with this. Any questions so far?
I feel like I'm the only one that ever talked.
And I like it, because everyone else seems like, well, Mateen never talked as much, if I remember correctly. But Mateen, you need to talk.
So
and Sammy also talks, I know, but again, go ahead.
So people can talk. I feel bad being the only one, but anyways, I actually have a question, because I feel like this line that you read is a little bit not in conflict, but sometimes, like, I don't know Rumi like even 1/10 as much as you do, but you see where it says, like, when from his inmost depths he raised a scream, the sea of bounty surged and sent a dream, right?
Yeah.
So you were saying, like, when you pray from the heart, Rumi's saying, when you pray from the heart, God answers your prayers. But I actually think it kind of is counterintuitive to even counter to the page prior, where it's saying, if God is willing, because even if you pray from the depths of your heart, Rumi himself is, if God is willing. Like, because how do we know if this is, like, whatever, as Persians say, like, salahishe, is this, I'm
exactly.
So it's kind of interesting that that's said. But is the Persian translation the same as this English here? Because the previous
I love it. Oh yes, it is. It is exactly the same. And here's the deal. Okay. You just tapped into the original of the discussion of choice versus destiny.
Okay.
You are right on the path. So that means that you're following and you're on the path. I don't want to get into the discussion right now, because I want you guys to build towards it. We will have this discussion, believe it or not, and you will have answers, because it's for us to actually find some answers here and then start building on that and hopefully work through it and so forth.
Okay.
You are right. You're right. You're spot on. Yes. This guy now is praying, and before he's talking about God willing and the fact that what's God's will and how, we need to submit to that. How come this guy didn't submit to God's will? Great question. But it's going to take more than a few minutes for us to actually answer that. So don't lose sight of that question, because you will hear answers about it. There's another thing that I want to also say, and that is, so this is great. I really wanted this conversation. Now, this is great. Some of the stuff that you guys will hear may sound in conflict, but they're not. They're actually almost the same.
Okay.
It's just that he is now trying to balance out between his experience and what he knows and what he has felt and what he has discovered with what we are trying to get to. And remember, we're stepping into a very, very unknown position right now. So far, everything for us has been our logic and our mind and how our logic and our mind is supposed to work. However, now he's bringing us from a different answer. And by the way, he's telling us, you got to put this mind aside. Oh, holy shit. How am I going to do that? I curse. That's okay. So it's, how am I going to do that? How am I going to let go of the mind? I can't do that. And believe it or not, even in my Farsi class, I have people to this day, and they've been with me for 2 years, and they're like, we can't, how could you tell us that we shouldn't think? And I'm like, not my problem. I'm not the one who's telling you, by the way, it's him. But the fact of the matter is that we are so programmed to hold on to what makes sense that we're scared of letting go. Rumi is trying to tell us that, you know what? You got to start letting go. You got to let go and you got to trust. Another thing that I have to mention here is the fact that when he's talking about the fact that when the sea of bounty, starts, surge and send him a dream, he is referring to also a biblical verse and also a Quranic verse that in Quran it says, every time you ask God, he answers. In Arabic, it says, "Ala bi zikrillah tatma'innul qulub." When you say the word of God, your heart starts feeling the a competence and feels whole, feels content, feels certain. So he's talking about the fact that once you start making that connection, he's talking about this connection now. Once you make that connection, you have to start feeling this contentment and feeling of completeness and the fact that you are protected. Okay. But yeah, great segue into that. I think we're gonna probably cross that in a matter of 1 or 2 sessions. So,
Mohsen, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Sorry for interrupting. So you talked in the beginning of this class, you talked about 4 aspects or 4 angles of a human self. And the first one of them was ego.
Yeah.
Then you talked about brain, heart, and soul. I'm a little confused about ego in the context of Rumi. What is ego?
Nafs. You want me to actually a literal translation, or you want to see what ego is really?
No, if you could, I understand the word nafs, but if you could define it a little bit in the context of Rumi.
Actually, the best way that I can actually define it is through Jung. Not even Rumi. It's something that to be translated or to be defined through what Carl Jung has put together. So what I'm bringing in is actually that definition. So in Rumi basically believes that our ego or nafs in this case is something that is bad and we should kill it. He actually, you guys will hear words that is saying that you gotta kill this thing. This thing is not helping anyone. You gotta basically, put this into a complete, severed his head and all that. I mean, he's using some pretty nasty language towards it. so Jung, believe it or not, one of the things that is very, very, how should I say it, very well known about Jung is the fact that he was a very connected person. Jung fully understood what Rumi and Hafez and these guys meant when they're talking about nafs or ego. So if I were to give you a very, very simple, and I'm going to try to actually bring some material from Jung, so actually we could then follow that through. I'll promise that. But if I were to give you, so our ego is anything that holds us, that makes us grab a hold of whatever it is in this life. So your ego tells you that if you don't work, you're going to be, I'm going to give you a preview of this. Your ego tells you if you don't work, you're going to go hungry. Okay. However, if we believe that if we want something from God, from deep from within our hearts, we should be okay, right? And Rumi is willing to support that with a lot of stories and facts. Again, facts, when I'm talking about, he would bring in everything and anything from verses of Quran and Bible and Torah. I mean, he would bring all three of them for you, just to give you that understanding and realization that if you want something from God, and by the way, this is all in harmony with anything that any self-help preacher out there, like Tony Robbins and all that, they tell you, right? They're like, create a vision board, have no doubt. I mean, these are the stuff that they say, and all this stuff is in line with what Rumi says. You want it, and you want it without a doubt, you're going to get it, because this is how this universe is supposed to work. Now, your ego is immediately in work. I'll give you another example. In one of my classes, I told people that, do you believe that if you wanted a Lamborghini from the heart, would you get it? And everybody said no. I'm like, you know why you keep saying no? Because your mind tells you it's impossible. But
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat that? I got distracted by.
Okay, that's fine. So I asked
about the class that you said somewhat.
I asked in my Farsi class, if you guys wanted a Lamborghini, do you believe you would have it? And everybody said no. After I had read a bunch of poetry about the fact that, if you want something from your heart, you will have it. And what we agreed on is the fact that it's your mind that immediately goes into effect, and it goes into your psyche that, wait a second, in order for you to have a Lamborghini, you have to have X amount of money, you have to have this, that, therefore you can't have it. And you don't have any of them. So ego is what binds us to this earthly life. It's a binding, because it comes from our needs. It comes from our every sense and every feeling and attribute that we developed after we took over this body. Ego is the one that tells you, if you called somebody and they didn't answer, don't call them again, because I'm hurt. By the way, it's the ego that's hurt. Ego is the one that tells you, if they looked at you this way, that's because they don't like you. This is what ego is. It's a very, very, and as we go forward, I'll try to actually kind of unravel more about it, but it is a very, very complex system within us, which its job to begin with is to protect us. It just wants to protect us. However, what it's doing to us is actually hurting us more. Ego is the one that tells you black or white. I mean, if you want to get really into it, everything that's happening around us right now is all feeding egos. It's hurting somebody's ego and it's feeding somebody else's ego. Think about it. There is no in between. There's nothing in between. And the moment that you say that you have to have acceptance, everyone attacks you. Oh, you can't. Why? Because their ego is like, oh, wait a second. This thing is going to start. If it actually gains traction, it's going to hurt me. Therefore, I'm not going to like it. But yeah, it's Jung who actually gives, Rumi most of his material around. I mean, I'm sorry, Rumi knew his stuff. If you want to understand fully how Rumi thinks about ego, Carl Jung probably got the best. I mean, he's the one who actually got the best out of everyone else.
Got it. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions, guys? Next Wednesday, please be here at 7, if you can.
Yes, sir.
And
I apologize too. My kids wouldn't come.
You are not the only one. Don't worry.
I apologize.
It's okay. No. But I'm just saying, we're gonna get into some exciting things, and it's gonna get exciting. Really, it's because all these things are questions. I mean, this choice versus destiny. Think about that. If you actually fully understand this, your life is going to be, I personally believe it's going to be different. Because we have people who believe that we have full choice in this life, and there are people who believe that our destiny has already been set. Therefore, they do not do anything towards their lives. They do not take any action, or they don't take any responsibility. So think about that, because it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a fantastic discussion. All right, guys. Have a very, Juna.
I'm going to email you this. Sorry, I was looking. I've been reading this book. This is Spiritual Gems of Islam for anyone. It's phenomenal. And there's actually a little, sorry, I made my kids bring it, area on ego, but I don't know. I mean, the guy is a Sufi and he talks a lot about Rumi, and see if it's relevant. And then you can maybe send it. I don't want to read it now. I'm sorry, Mr. Abdul-Jabbar. I don't want to pronounce your first name wrong, but I'll send it because I don't know anything. He can see if it's really related.
Okay,
but
cool.
I thought it was a good excerpt. Excerpt. So I'll email it to you and see if it's befitting. All right.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Sure. I'm sorry for being late. I apologize.
Okay, it's all good. All right, guys. Have a
good
great
Thank you
rest
very
of the
much.
week. I'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.